The betrayal rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the people you once protected, supported, defended, sometimes even saved. Have you ever noticed that the more you sacrifice for certain people, the more strangely they begin to treat you over time? At first they seem grateful, then something changes. Their tone becomes colder, your presence starts bothering them, and eventually, the same person who once needed your help begins resenting you for it. Why does human nature work this way? Why do some people become loyal after receiving help, while others slowly turn against the very person who lifted them up? Most people never realize that help creates something far more dangerous than gratitude. It creates psychological imbalance, and human beings rarely tolerate feeling emotionally inferior for long. I am the Watcher, and here, in Shadow Insight, we uncover the hidden mechanisms behind human behavior, the truths people sense but rarely put into words. In this episode, you'll understand why some acts of kindness quietly transform into resentment, why certain people betray those who cared for them the most, and why the need to protect someone can sometimes create the very conditions for betrayal. Watch carefully, because by the end of this video, you may begin to see past relationships, friendships, even family bonds very differently. And if you've ever experienced this kind of betrayal before, subscribe to Shadow Insight, because some patterns in human nature only become visible once you know where to look. At first, everything feels genuine. You help someone during a difficult moment. Maybe they were emotionally lost, financially unstable, rejected by others, broken after a failure. And naturally, you step in. You listen to them when nobody else does. You give your time, your energy, sometimes even opportunities they could not have reached alone. In the beginning, their gratitude seems sincere. They thank you constantly. They admire you. They speak about you with respect. But with time, small changes begin to appear, subtle changes. Have you ever noticed how some people become strangely distant after you help them too much? Not immediately, slowly, almost invisibly. They stop looking you in the eyes the same way. Your advice starts irritating them. Simple remarks suddenly sound offensive to them. Your presence begins to feel heavy. And the strange thing is, you often become more careful with them precisely because you sense the tension growing. You try to avoid conflict. You become more understanding, more patient. But somehow, the relationship continues deteriorating. Then come the small acts of disrespect, passive-aggressive comments, cold behavior in front of others, dismissive attitudes, moments where they subtly undermine you socially. Sometimes they even begin criticizing the very qualities that once helped them. Your discipline becomes control. Your honesty becomes arrogance. Your support becomes manipulation. And most people never understand what is happening at this stage, because on the surface, it makes no sense. You helped them. You sacrificed for them. So why does it suddenly feel like they resent you for it? Why do people sometimes become colder toward the ones who treated them best? The answer usually hides beneath the visible behavior, because human beings are not driven only by gratitude. They are also driven by pride, comparison, ego, and the silent need to preserve their sense of value. And this is where the real mechanism quietly begins. Most people think betrayal comes from hatred, but very often it comes from humiliation. Not open humiliation, psychological humiliation, the kind that remains silent. Because when someone helps you repeatedly, an invisible imbalance begins to form between both people. One becomes the giver, the other becomes the receiver. And at first, this feels comforting. But over time, something deeper starts happening inside the human mind. Have you ever wondered why some people suddenly become defensive around the person who supported them the most? It is because help can unintentionally create a painful emotional mirror. Every act of support reminds them of what they lacked, their weakness, their dependence, their failure at that moment in life. And human beings struggle deeply with feeling psychologically inferior. Adler believed that much of human behavior is driven by the need to escape feelings of inferiority. People want to feel capable, respected, independent. But when someone constantly occupies the stronger position in a relationship, the other person may slowly begin experiencing hidden shame instead of gratitude, especially if their ego is fragile. This is why some people start resisting advice from the very person who helped them. Not because the advice is wrong, but because accepting it forces them to remember the imbalance between you, and the human ego hates prolonged dependence. Watch carefully. Many people do not betray kindness because they are evil. They betray the emotional discomfort your presence creates inside them. Your success reminds them of their failures. Your stability exposes their instability. Your generosity unintentionally highlights what they could not provide for themselves. Jung believed that people often hide the parts of themselves they fear the most, and sometimes the person helping them becomes the living reminder of those hidden insecurities. This is why resentment can quietly grow beneath gratitude. Not openly, not consciously at first, but slowly, silently, until helping them no longer feels like support in their mind, but proof that they once needed saving. Here is the part most people refuse to see. Help is never completely neutral. Even when your intentions are pure, helping someone changes the psychological balance of the relationship. Because the moment one person repeatedly rescues another, an invisible hierarchy often begins to form. One becomes emotionally stronger, the other becomes emotionally dependent, and human beings are extremely sensitive to invisible power dynamics, especially when other people can see them. Have you ever noticed how some people become colder toward you precisely after they recover? The moment they no longer need you, their behavior changes, almost as if your existence itself becomes uncomfortable. Why? Because while they were struggling, your help felt necessary. But once they regain stability, they begin seeing the relationship through a different lens. Now your presence reminds them of the version of themselves they are trying to escape. And people will often destroy reminders of their weakness to protect their ego, even if that reminder once saved them. Nietzsche understood something disturbing about human nature. People do not simply seek comfort, they seek power, dignity, psychological control over how they see themselves. And when someone feels emotionally indebted for too long, resentment quietly begins replacing gratitude. This is why betrayal often appears suddenly, but in reality, it has usually been building for months, sometimes years. The passive-aggressive comments, the emotional distance, the need to challenge you publicly, the strange competitiveness that slowly appears. These are not random behaviors. They are attempts to psychologically rebalance the relationship. Because some people would rather attack the person who helped them than continue feeling smaller beside them. And the darker truth is this: the more sacrifices you make for certain people, the more emotionally exposed you become. You assume loyalty will naturally grow from kindness. But human nature does not always work that way. Sometimes excessive help creates admiration. Sometimes it creates dependency. And sometimes it creates silent resentment, powerful enough to eventually become betrayal. Especially when the other person never learns how to face their own shame. But watch carefully. The deepest part of this pattern is not only about the people who betray. It is also about the people who constantly place themselves in the position of saving others. Because with time, you begin to notice something uncomfortable. Some people are repeatedly betrayed in almost identical ways. Different faces, different relationships, same outcome. Why? Because many helpers unconsciously build relationships around being needed. Have you ever wondered why certain people feel valuable only when they are rescuing someone? They become the listener, the provider, the stable one, the person who absorbs everyone else's chaos. And at first, this feels meaningful. It gives them purpose, importance, emotional identity. But slowly, they stop asking a dangerous question. Would this person still value me if I stopped saving them? Most people never realize that constant rescuing can quietly become a form of control. Not always malicious control, but emotional control. Because when you become indispensable to someone, part of you begins expecting loyalty in return, gratitude, recognition, emotional security. And when betrayal finally happens, the pain feels unbearable. Because it destroys the identity you built around being the good one. But human relationships cannot survive on emotional depth forever. If someone remains beneath you psychologically for too long, one of two things usually happens. They grow beside you, or they eventually try to escape the feeling of inferiority you represent. And sometimes, without realizing it, you may have ignored the warning signs from the beginning. The jealousy hidden behind admiration, the passive resentment disguised as humor, the discomfort they felt whenever others praised you. Because deep down, part of you wanted to believe that your sacrifices would protect you from betrayal. But human nature does not reward sacrifice automatically. Sometimes people appreciate what you did for them, and sometimes they resent needing it at all. The strange thing about people is this. Many individuals would rather rewrite history than confront the version of themselves that once depended on you. Most betrayals do not begin with hatred. They begin with imbalance. An invisible, emotional imbalance that slowly grows between two people until gratitude turns into discomfort, and discomfort turns into resentment. At first, you believed your loyalty would strengthen the relationship, your patience, your sacrifices, your willingness to help. But human nature is more complicated than that, because helping someone does not only affect their situation, it affects their pride, their identity, the way they see themselves in relation to you. And for certain people, that feeling becomes unbearable over time. That was the hidden mechanism from the beginning. The betrayal was never only about what you did for them. It was about what your presence continued reminding them about themselves, their weakness, their dependence, the version of themselves they wanted to forget. And this is why some people suddenly become cold the moment they recover. Not because your help meant nothing, but because it meant too much. Watch carefully. The people who truly value you will use your support to grow beside you. The others will eventually see your kindness as a mirror they cannot emotionally tolerate. And perhaps the deepest lesson is this. You should help people from clarity, not from the need to be needed. Because the moment your value depends on rescuing others, you unknowingly place your emotional stability in the hands of human nature itself. I am the Watcher, and this was Shadow Insight. If this episode made you recognize certain patterns in your own life, leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Shadow Insight for more explorations into the hidden mechanisms behind human behavior. But then, what happens the moment someone can no longer control how you see yourself?